It's all yours.
All right, very good. Good morning, everybody. My name is Lisa Louck. I am a district forester for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. And so, anybody have a guess at what a forester might do? Anybody?
Clean up the forest.
Clean up the forest, okay. Anybody else?
Work with like the forest animals.
Work with forest animals, okay. Anybody else? All right, some decent guesses there. So, and it's a tiny bit of both of those things, but not so much. What I'm really doing is helping to manage a forest. Do any of you guys garden? Grow a garden? Does any of your family grow a garden? So when you grow a garden, you are basically trying to manage the sunlight and the nutrients that get to those plants so you can maximize the benefits that you get from there. If you want a big tomato plant, you give the tomato plant a little bit of the sunlight that it needs and the water that it needs and take care of it that way. Forest management is basically that, except we're looking over our heads instead of over top of it like we are, like we have the ability to in a garden. And so when we're looking at a forester, and what I do as a job is managing private forest. And so out of all the forests that we have in Iowa, do you guys even think of Iowa as a forest kind of state? It's more of a corn and bean and other things kind of state. And actually, any ideas what Iowa used to be before settlement, before it was corn and beans? What was a lot of Iowa?
Plains.
Well, I heard forest and I heard plains. And so it was some forest, but really only, we actually have more forests today in the state of Iowa than we had at settlement time when we first came here. And what the majority of the state was prairie. It was a tall grass prairie that covered everything, and it grew for thousands of years before we got here, and then we started to till it up and to farm it and to use it in different ways. And since then, we've actually gotten more forest has grown around some of the rivers and out from there and some of our areas that weren't good for farming, and some different things like that. And so even though Iowa isn't a huge forestry state, it does have a lot of forests. We have, I think, between 5 and 6 million acres of forest in Iowa. But when we think of the forest in Iowa, where do you guys find a forest? Where can you go today to find a forest in our area? The river? Okay, yep, you can. Yep, all the river bottoms are covered with forest. Do you guys go to any parks? So like Big Hollow, Geode, those are basically, large tracts of forest in there. And so even though we think of forest as being our parks and some of things like that, actually like 90% of our forests in Iowa are privately owned, are owned by landowners just like you guys, just like our parents. Yes, I don't own land and you guys might not own land, but that is a lot of our forest. And so my job really gets to be working with those private landowners who have that resource that we all use. Even though it's private landowners who own that 90% of the forest, we all still get the benefit of all the carbon sequestration. You guys have heard that word, right? From with everything going on with climate change. We're getting the air quality benefits, we're getting the water quality benefits. Something that a lot of people don't know is like one single tree can uptake like 100 gallons of water per day if it's a large tree. Well, if we're in a flooded area and the rain is still coming, that one tree is actually doing us a service. And so, so those private landowners that own 90% of our forest are the people that I get to work with, to walk their ground with them, to tell them what they have, to suggest things that they could do to make it better or to improve it or to grow it more like a healthy garden. And sometimes that's cutting trees or doing other things or cleaning up the forest. Sometimes with the forest animals, we're dealing with people who like to hunt or look at animals, and so we're telling them how they can grow trees and the types of trees that they can grow to maximize that. And so my day-to-day job isn't a ton of public safety issues. And so when Brian asked me to come here, I was prepared to speak about and will speak about some of the other kind of aspects of what you can do in a job similar to mine in conservation, as will your next speaker, my coworker Paul Kay, who will be here next week. He'll go more into the depth of all the conservation side of things, the public safety from almost a law enforcement standpoint, as well as a wildlife and public, general public citizen safety standpoint. But later on in my talk, I'm gonna go into a little bit of like park management and some of the things like that. But I first want to dwell on some of my other day-to-day kind of duties that do delve a little bit more into public safety realm and talk about how that might apply. So aside from doing most of my days are spent walking in somebody's woods or back at the computer writing up a plan about what I saw and giving them recommendations or doing some of that, two aspects of my job that I get to that deal greatly with public safety is one is urban tree inventories, or tree inventories, tree assessments, risk tree assessments. So what we're looking at basically is a tree can fall on somebody, right? Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay, a tree can fall. And so what you're doing when you are looking at whether or not a tree can fall is assessing what type of tree it is. Does it have any defects or bad spots that would cause it to fail? And then you're also looking at where is this tree located? Is it sitting over our classroom today, that it's a huge tree that could fall through the roof if it fell? Is it sitting over your house or another structure? Is it sitting over playground equipment? And so one of the aspects of my job that I've done a lot of is walking. So we're lucky here in Burlington. We actually have a city forester that cares for all of our trees. So if you guys don't hear about a lot of tree accidents falling on cars and falling on houses and falling on people from our street trees and our park trees, it's because somebody's out there looking at it a lot. We have a city forester and a park person here in Burlington. But West Burlington and Weaver and Mediapolis and Fort Madison and all these other towns around, they don't have a forester or somebody who's looking at that. So part of my job as the DNR is I literally walk up and down every street in one of those towns, look at every single tree that's between the sidewalk and the street, what type it is, what its wood looks like, what its leaves look like, and those things are telling me, is this possibly gonna fail? So from a public safety standpoint, something like that is, you cannot predict the future. I don't have a crystal ball, and neither does the most experienced person looking at trees, but you're using the knowledge that you have about trees and about what's going on in the area and making your best guess as to whether or not that's a safe or unsafe situation. And so this is true of campgrounds. Do any of you guys camp? And so I get out and camp, and you know what happens when we're camping sometimes? A storm comes. And so whether or not you know it, that campground that you're in has probably been assessed to determine the trees that are standing there. If a storm were to come, a regular thunderstorm or a reasonable windstorm, would those people be unsafe in that area? And if so, they're going to preemptively take it out. So when the storm is happening at 10 o'clock at night, as you're in your tent, good morning, you do not have as much of a worry, because you are responsible for the people who are in that campground, whether you're the park manager or the owner or whoever, whatever that setup might be. And so from a safety standpoint, so what ways could a tree fail or hurt somebody? Give me an example of the leaves falling on you. What? The fruit? No, yeah. And that is actually, if you guys have ever stood under a walnut or a hickory tree and they're falling, you can get bopped on the head, and luckily they're small enough, but they usually don't get too hurt.
A tree fell on my dog. Being so serious, a tree fell on my dog.
Well, and that is, and so, as terrible as it was, your dog pretty
No,
hurt?
survived, he was good.
And so, but, you know, it is something that, that really was, your dog was probably out in an area where there was a tree.
Did you go to the park?
That wasn't funny, Mr. Pepper.
My dog could have died, and they making jokes about it.
I waited to make sure it wasn't hurt.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that looking at that tree maybe ahead of time and seeing that it had a broken branch maybe could have prevented something like that. And so when we're in the city or we're in the parks and we are, again, anything to do with working for the city or for that park, you are gonna be somewhat responsible for those trees. Now again, nobody expects you to know that a tree is gonna fall that was perfectly healthy and wouldn't otherwise have shown signs, but one that has a lot of dead branches and is hanging over the park merry-go-round, we should be looking at that, and that should be something that we could prevent. And so, when, you know, some aspects of public safety that I think apply certainly to conservation and to parks and to what I do that I think could be true over a lot of it is there's a lot of ways to go about getting to public safety, making sure that everybody is safe, and you can use education to do that, like put up a sign that says, watch out, acorns falling on your head, or watch out, rocks falling from the cliff where you're hiking. You could use education in the way of, hey, you're going to get mauled if you go approach that bear and try to hug it in the national park. Have you guys seen some of those videos online of some people that maybe don't use their heads completely when they're approaching large wildlife? What's that? You're not watching people getting mauled, but everybody has probably seen that video where somebody is walking up to the bear in Yellowstone thinking they're gonna get a closer picture, and the bear starts running at them and jumps on their car or something. Yes, I'm not watching the mauling videos either. I don't know where those are located, but so, you know, with looking at different aspects of public safety for conservation and for being in the outdoors, you're looking at education. You could do a ton with that. You could do a ton with preventing just by, you know, making sure they're not getting into the bad spot in the first place. So education is a big part of it. You can also do restrictions. You know, if I have a big cliff on my park that everybody tries to climb and the rocks are falling on it, and I know that they're probably gonna fall off 10 foot up and hurt themselves, I'm going to restrict access to that cliff altogether so they can't get to it. And then, you know, you could certainly do enforcement of different things, and that is unfortunately a big part of different park management is having to restrict or stop people from doing dumb things or things that can hurt them or other people. And so there's a lot of ways that you can go about it, but when you're talking about trees and looking at them for assessing, so much of that is on the preventative and the education side of making sure people know that a dead branch could fall on them, making sure that they know that a big tree splitting in the middle might very well split in the next ice storm and fall on their car. And so that kind of thing can really help that way. So another big aspect of public safety that I deal with in my job or dabble with, because I don't do it on a regular basis, is prescribed fire. So you guys have seen the forest fires that are happening out west and up in Canada. We got all the smoke from that. So here in the Midwest, we have a completely different type of trees, okay? So we are not usually, have ever really been susceptible to a crown fire like they have out west, where they have evergreen trees. And the fire is up in the tops of the trees and going across. So we don't really deal with that here in the Midwest. But I'll get into this a little bit more in my education. When I went to school for my Bachelor of Science in Forestry, I did some training in fire when I was down at school, and a lot of my classmates went out west and fought fires out there. And so, you know, we learned a lot of the skills back here in the Midwest that we use for prescribed fire. but we don't luckily have to deal with wildfire. So what do you think prescribed fire is?
You burn all the dead stuff.
You're burning all the dead stuff, you're doing that, but what's prescribed fire as opposed to a wildfire? If your doctor gives you a prescription
It's
to,
like burning stuff on purpose.
it is.
So like, cause if you were like, so like the wildfire doesn't have like space to spread, or like things will burn, so like, I'm not explaining.
No, that you're on the right track. Absolutely, you got it. And so, so a wildfire is that it's wild. It spreads without us wanting it to in areas where we don't want it to. Got it? You guys have seen some of the damage that has happened from some of those. So here in the Midwest, because we had so much of our ground was. Do you guys remember what so much of our ground was before settlement? It wasn't forest. It was prairies. And so can you guys picture what prairies are? They're tall grasses, they are flowers, and it is just a thick cover of stuff that you could barely walk through. And again, some of them are so tall you can't really see. If there was a prairie between me and Mr. Carper, I would be able to see him still, but barely. He would be hidden by all the structure of that prairie. And so part of what I do in my job and what the DNR does and what a lot of conservation people do is we're trying to put back prairie that used to be here, the kind of cover that the wildlife used and the pollinators used, and it was good for water quality. We're trying to put a lot of that back. But fire was traditionally a part of our landscape when it was all prairie before we all came here and started to farm and live here. That means fires were started on purpose by Native Americans for different reasons. They were started on accident from lightning and from railroads and from people starting a fire for cooking or whatnot. So all of the vegetation that used to be in Iowa was used to fire. And so when we're trying to put that same vegetation back, we're using fire to manage it and to control it and to make it the best that it can be. And so a prescribed fire is where we take an area that is much bigger than your whole campus of your school here, that is growing in that tall grasses, and purposely light it on fire. So what do you guys think? Do you think that the way to purposely light something on fire is just to throw out a match and see what happens? Gasoline, I heard. Yes, so the fuel is actually there. The fuel are the grasses that are gonna burn really hot. And I actually, Mr. Carper, is it okay if I pass around my phone with a video on it of some of the prescribed fires? And so what the reason for this is to, again, manage the vegetation so it does what we want it to do, which is grow healthy and good for all the wildlife and the pollinators and the things like that. And so the grasses that we plant purposely to be more like it used to be are something that, again, we have to burn to keep up. And so by doing that, what we do is we set the fire purposely, but we don't just take out a match and throw it out there. We completely prepare the entire area to make sure that it's not going to get away from us by making a different vegetation around the end that won't burn, by doing different things. And then you're also looking at wind. How do you guys think wind would affect a fire? Because fires are fueled by air. And so if my fire was going this way and the wind shifted direction, where's my fire going? Back towards me. And so you're keeping in mind things like that. So these 4 videos here are just a prescribed fire. Somebody's lighting that, and you can see the very heavy smoke when it comes around to you guys that you cannot see through at all. Sorry, I switched my camera halfway, but you can see the flame lengths are higher than us. And so it's something that is, yes, I am a really bad videographer, as you guys will see with my phone. But and there's a couple other videos there. Just pass that around and let that play as you go. And so from a public safety standpoint, guys, those fires can be incredibly dangerous. They can cross over into something we don't want, even if we did the best planning. And sometimes those fires are right along a highway. A lot of our parks, some of what I burned with the DNR sits right along Highway 61. That's a major highway, agreed? And so big semis are going down there, people are going down there all the time. The smoke that you'll see in there that is so thick that, again, if it was between you and I would barely be able to see you. If the smoke all of a sudden went onto the road, what would happen there, you think? What's the public safety issue there? You can't see, and then what? You know, and so it is something that what we're looking at is managing the kind of conservation that we want to do and managing it so it does have that public safety aspect. So we're looking at the weather that day, we're looking at what the wind direction is doing, making sure, again, that fire isn't going to creep onto a neighbor's land. Something that I didn't know before, you guys know that we have hog buildings around. People raise hogs in a large building. Have you ever seen those or smelled those around? Anybody? Okay. So you could actually kill the entire group of hogs just by letting that smoke go into their building there. And so that means even from a public safety aspect, does anybody have asthma in the room or any breathing issues? Anybody in their family does? And so even that's something that, again, that smoke cannot be just going on to areas where people shouldn't be or doing that. And so so we still want to do that management, and we still want to do what's best for the prairie, which is to burn it. But again, we're using those, our main goal is to do that conservation management, but public safety and our safety has to be, you know, prime in there. Even from a standpoint of our safety, you know, during a fire, again, a lot of my fellow students went out and fought some of the fires out west, and that is, you know, you could be really brave and really awesome to be able to do that, but you have to be really safe too. You got to be looking out for yourself and for others and have that common sense that that takes there. So those two are aspects of, again, just things that I dabble in for that. So let's get into, I mentioned that my degree was a Bachelor of Science in Forestry, but a lot of the other degrees that are out there that are around the same thing are wildlife biology degrees, natural resources management degrees, environmental science degrees. I know that Western has not only a forestry minor, but also like a Parks and Rec. So I actually graduated with a forestry degree, but I did not think I was going to be working in people's timber. I thought I was going to be managing parks. And so I learned a lot about the public safety aspect of park management from my education there. And even though it's not something that I use on a daily basis, because I don't currently manage a park, I'm not the geode manager or the Big Hollow manager or the Grand Canyon park ranger, but we still are using I'll tell you still about some of those aspects. So in park management, what are our parks? What are our national parks, guys? Why do we have them? Why do we have state parks? Why do we have county parks? Why do we have city parks? Fun? What else? I think it's still playing there. Why do we have parks? You can tell me, why do we have a park? Why are parks existing? What do we do at parks? Anything about it, you know? Entertainment, absolutely, yes. Absolutely. So not everybody owns land like we talked about. I don't own land. I don't think a lot of you guys in here do. We don't have our own place to jog out in the forest or to walk and see wildlife or that. But these parks are all of ours, guys. Do you know that? Do you know that Crapo Park belongs to every single one of us in this room? Big Hollow Park that Des Moines County owns belongs to every single one of us in this room. We are public land managers is what we are, because we are public land owners, because it's ours. We should be able to use it, but we should all be able, that's the same thing that allows us the ownership of that park also means that everybody else owns it too. And when you guys all get in a room, do you all decide on the exact same thing to do? No. Everybody likes to do different things, and everybody likes to enjoy their spots in different ways. And so a lot of park management and from the safety standpoint and the allowance of everybody being able to use it how they should and want to, is you're protecting the resource. That means the big tree that everybody wants to go up to, but if somebody starts to put their hatchet into it to carve their name into it, that means somebody down the road can't see that same big tree. And so you're protecting the trees or the rocks or the water or the different things from people messing it up in some way, from driving through it with their car when they shouldn't be driving through it because there's fish in there and frogs in there and turtles in there. From doing different things like that. But then you're also protecting the people from the resource. Like I mentioned, I went to school down in Southern Illinois. They have huge cliffs people rock climb and get up on. But again, sometimes those rocks fall. They need to warn people about that and let them know that. And so you're protecting, as a park manager, you're protecting the resource from the people, but you're also protecting the people from the resource. Does that make sense? Anybody? No? A little bit? And so, one of the, again, you know, I kind of mentioned some of the ways that you can do that. You can deter people from doing something. So I was at this, I think it was the Gila Monument, a cave-dwelling Native American group down in New Mexico. I got to go there for school. And so this was this awesome, intricate cave built into the cliffs. Have you guys ever seen that on anything where, so you should look it up. I think it was the Gila cave dwellings. And so we got to walk through. It's opened, you know, they found where the dwellings used to be and have protected it by making walkways so everybody can come up and see how these Native Americans used to live in these caves and completely exist, you know, through this lifestyle. And so you got up into here and you're climbing all around and it's all this awesome stuff to look at. And then they had this room down where you could, where the people who used to live there would maybe be in the winter time, or they stored some food. It was down further and it had a ladder going down because that's how they would access it. But they didn't want you to go down there. And so instead of putting up a big barrier, or instead of having somebody standing there at the end saying, don't climb down there, that when you look down there and you wanted to go down in there, and everybody who walked by probably wanted to go down in there, it just had a rock down at the bottom, and the rock was painted with one word: don't. And it kind of covered everything, like whatever you're thinking, don't. Whatever you were gonna do, don't. You know, and so it was a way for everybody to enjoy that park and not fall on the ladder and break their head as they went down it, or break something, or somebody fell into there, or so on and so forth. They were able to deter just by, you know, something like that. And so, Brian, I still have 20 minutes, and we'll just leave 10 at the end for, okay. So, another aspect is when we're looking at that, as far as public safety, we're going to talk about all the levels of kind of our parks, okay? And so again, I mentioned our city parks. All of you guys should go check that out sometime if you don't already. Again, it's, you know, for us, nice fall colors, nice place to walk. And so our city parks are used pretty frequently. They're used by dog walkers and people. They have high traffic. Kids are playing at the playground, so on and so forth. You're going to manage that a lot differently. You're gonna have better signage as to making sure people aren't gonna hurt themselves. You're gonna have somebody going through there frequently. You're gonna check those trees frequently. Now, how is that different from a park that is out in the middle of the woods that has one trail going through it that not many people use? How would you do things differently there? Would you do less or more? What do you think? Less or more with that? Less. You would, because not many people are using it. They're not needing it very much at all, and so it's something that you could not worry about the tree that just fell and just leave it there. You can not worry about some other aspect of the trail being having a hole in it or something like that, because not very many people are using it. So then let's talk about our state parks. Again, has nobody been out to Geode before? Okay, and so that's just about 15 or 20 minutes away from us. Has the big lake there, and then it's surrounded by a lot of trails, has a campground, different things going on there. And so they have campers there. And so they not only have to worry about people during the daytime being there and using their areas, but they have to worry about people at nighttime using their areas and doing some of that. And it's the same as some of our county parks, they're the same way. So again, you're not only worrying about the safety of your people during the day and what they're doing during the day, but all the stuff that happens at night, somebody hiking around at night, falling and getting hurt and needing to, get help out of a cliff or something like that. And so it's something that is a difference depending on what uses the park has, depending on how many people are using it. So have any of you guys ever been able to go to a national park by any chance, like the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone? We have a national, there's Indian Mounds up in northeast Iowa. They're not a national park, but it's like a national historic site. So it's the same kind of area. Elsewhere in Iowa, we don't have any other national parks. We do have one, around in states around here, but so those are visited by millions of people a year. They are visited by people from outside of the country, from inside of the country, from all kinds of places with a ton of different uses. And do you guys, it's something that I didn't grow up. Did you guys grow up camping or doing that kind of thing? I didn't. You did. And so you might be a little bit better suited when you go into a park to know what would be not smart and what would be okay to do. Starting a fire anywhere instead of in a fire pit, you probably wouldn't do because you've been camping before and maybe know that that's not okay. But people that speak a different language than you, people that have never been to a wild space like this, that again don't know that you cannot walk up and hug the buffalo. That is something that is actually a real thing that, again, from that public safety aspect. And so if you've ever been to a national park, they will have signs that will literally say, do not pet the buffalo, do not get out of your car when the buffalo approaches your car, do not try to walk up to the elk or the buffalo and take a picture. And people will be throughout the park reminding people that. You might have missed that sign because you were on your phone when you drove into the park, but there's going to be extra people there because they need to have those people there. They have millions of visitors. They need to make sure that people aren't dying every other day by having a buffalo walk over them or by falling down into the Grand Canyon cliff because they thought that they could just keep walking and not knowing that they really had to stop, that it really was a sheer drop off. And so even those different aspects and those different levels, guys, of that is something that I think really gives this whole conservation field such a range. You could like working with people. How many people like to be around people? All right, I do, but nobody else does. How many people don't like to be around people? Okay, and so, the conservation field, I am kind of a mix of both, but I could do a lot less socializing if I wanted to, but I walk in the woods by myself quite a bit. I don't interact with too many people. I don't have to deal with the public and answer questions over and over again, but some people who are good at that or who like that kind of thing might be drawn to more of a public park, aspect of things as far as that goes. Working with wildlife, there's, I think, a lot of people who underestimate the amount of wildlife and the importance of wildlife that we have here in Iowa and what we could be doing to help and to manage that. And so even on the wildlife end of the conservation, and here again, you are doing a lot of safety of that animal. Did you guys hear about the bird flu? Has anybody heard that term, the bird flu, that has been going around Iowa and the rest of the United States here and there? And so it's a bird infection, but we have to know that even somebody who sees a dead bird has to call somebody and say, well, what is this, what happened to this? And then something different has to be done with something that might have a bird flu infection than just a regular bird who hit a window and fell down and did that. And so even a public safety aspect of some of the DNR stuff from that way. And I'll last leave you with the, I think one of the least glamorous parts of what the DNR does, but a really important part that none of us really think about, but we all benefit from, is the DNR, besides having the whole conservation arm, the wildlife biologists, the foresters, the park managers, the law enforcement people, the fisheries people, the DNR also has an environmental services division, which is water quality and air quality. So they make sure that the factory in town isn't just blowing out all their smoke that is coming and lingering on the rest of our town. They're making sure that somebody's sewage system isn't going directly into the creek that you and I are fishing out of. And so some of the things like that are another public safety aspect, as well as a regulatory and enforcement aspect of what the DNR does. And so I think that we're probably getting close. I see some things, I answered a couple of questions on there. What are some of the questions that I didn't answer so far?
Why did you get into that career?
Why did I get into the career? I lucked into it, but I did like hiking. I did like being outside. I did like learning about trees and different aspects of the environment. But I actually was in community college and took an aptitude test, which is one of those that asks you a lot of questions about what you like to do and tries to determine what you'd be good at. And forester was one of the ones, and I knew nothing about it and said, I like forests. And so I kind of fell into it by then looking into what schools offered that, which in Illinois, it was Southern Illinois. And then again, I got my Bachelor of Science in Forestry. And that was a 4-year degree, but again, I could have gone about it by getting a minor in something like environmental science or a biology, and then probably could have complemented that with a lot of others. Did that answer the question? Okay. What's another question? The hiring process? So for DNR, it is certainly they, if it goes open to the public, they are gonna want the degree for most of the jobs, that 4-year degree. They love experience. And guys, you can get experience with any job that you are thinking of today, right now. You do not need to work in that field, but something else that you're doing is probably helping to prepare you. But anything that you could do. I mowed lawns for a while, but again, I then work with a little bit of equipment. I work with being outdoors in different weather and dealing with different things like that. And so even mowing lawns had some aspects of what was preparing me. So I did have other outdoor jobs, and I actually worked for a nonprofit that did river cleanups and went up and down the river literally cleaning up garbage, big barrels and tires and refrigerators and different things off of the banks of the river and the islands of the rivers. But even that, again, I got to know plants that way. I got to know some of the learn some more about what was going on with the forest. And so I feel like any job that you do, anything that you're even doing, again, gardening, you're learning something about growing plants and about how everything is needing the different nutrients and different things to grow best. And so, so yes. What else you guys got?
How has it affected your life or your family's life?
How has it affected my life or my family's life? I think having a job that I like and enjoy certainly affects my life on a daily basis. And I am somebody who I think we can find happiness in whatever job that we have, but if you are doing something that you actually want to do and that you do feel strongly about, that is kind of everything for setting you up for that happiness. If you can like what you do and not be dreading going to work, I think that does so much. And again, I'm somebody that even when I cleaned up garbage, I liked it. It was fun because I liked the people that I worked around and I liked being outside, and there was good aspects of it, even though I was literally, dealing with stinky mud and nasty bugs and different things like that. But just that, I think that, and then my family's life, hopefully I get them more involved with, being out in the outdoors and caring about the outdoors like I do through my job, So you guys have heard a few different speakers. Has there been some that you are wanting to look further into after having heard some? Any particular ones, or you don't have to say it if you don't want to. Correctionals, yes, absolutely. And so, and that is, and again, the conservation officer will come in and you'll see how really alike so much of that, again, enforcement or regulatory is. You have to know the rules well, you have to understand them well, you have to be able to communicate. And guys, this is something, how do you feel like I did communicating to you guys today about what I did? So good, bad. My 8-year-old son has the, and it's okay, I get a lot of this and that's okay. But I need to be able to communicate to people why it is important what I do. I need to be able to communicate to the people I work with why they should care that I'm telling them to do something with their trees. I need to be able to communicate, if I was a park manager, to somebody why it's important that they listen to that safety issue that I was telling them about. And so whether it's written communication, talking to somebody, explaining to somebody, being able to show it or get it through signage or anything else like that, you could use creativity. So I want to throw out there that even if you're thinking about something completely different, your creativity of being able to convince people how to do something might very well be what somebody in conservation needs to put on a sign to show people what it is they need to do, or to show better what they need to do. And so even if what you're thinking of doesn't even come close to conservation, again, some of those skills or some of what you're doing might intersect with it in some way. I think that even everything from architecture and green building is, a ton of different ways to go about it. So anybody else here listen to a speaker that they can look into a little bit more? And just that, again, all of these guys, like myself included, again, there are so many different ways and aspects, and it doesn't have to be anything close to my job. But if you enjoy being outdoors, if you enjoy parks or, anything like that, something like this could, again, be in your future, be something that you end up wanting to do something with. Is that?
That's perfect.
Very good. Oh, thank you. And I have some other fire pictures if anybody else wants to see. Flames going